Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is James Lectures from the Desk, and this is part 3. And last week I had one of these lectures on echo chambers and had some technical difficulties, and it split it into 2. I had to go back and do the second part again. And so today I want to talk a little bit more. Now, I've spoken about them already, and I don't want to spend this particular stream or video on really repeating the anatomy of what an echo chamber is. If you're just finding this, you think, what is this? Part 1, part 2 on the channel, you can see it there. I mean, we know the general shape of an echo community, right? Or an echo chamber. A community gathers around a shared understanding of the world, right? And in that sense, all communities do that. Its members then, in whatever community it is, develop common language and common explanation, common enemies, and common conclusions. And over time, agreement can become so ordinary that nobody notices when it ceases to be the result of thought and becomes the price of admission. Then we have the echo chamber, okay? So I want to revisit the issue from another direction, because the danger is not simply that an echo chamber may cause you to believe something false. The deeper danger is that it can slowly train you to require permission before you're willing to know what you know. You might have to have permission for you to actually agree with yourself. And that's a serious problem. A person may correct a mistaken belief when better evidence appears. But when a person has surrendered the authority to examine, interpret, and name their own experience, the problem is no longer merely intellectual. It has entered the structure of the self. So you're no longer asking whether something is true. You're asking whether you are permitted to believe it. And that could be theological, that could be about politics, it could be about life, it could be about parenting, it could be about economics, it could be about what you believe about you. And so you're no longer examining what you see in this situation. You're looking around, you're checking the room, you're checking the temperature. You're trying to determine what seeing something different may cost you. And that is where I want to begin today. There is a difference between receiving wisdom from a community and borrowing your permission to exist from the community. There's a difference between allowing trusted people to challenge you and requiring their approval before you can trust your own mind. There's a difference between humility and self-erasure. The difficulty is that these differences are rarely obvious from the inside. I mean, they can feel almost identical. And you may think that you're being teachable when you are actually afraid to disagree. You can call yourself loyal when you become dependent. You may believe that you're protecting unity when you're protecting yourself from the consequences of being seen. And you may even call your silence wisdom, because admitting that it is fear, it would force you to confront what your belonging requires. This doesn't happen only in cults, not just extreme political movements or, obviously controlling religious organizations. It happens in families. It happens in churches. It happens in businesses, universities, professional associations, therapeutic spaces, social movements, online communities, and even a bunch of friends sitting on the back porch on a Saturday. Any group can become a place where agreement is rewarded with intimacy and difference is answered with distance. Think about that. That exchange does not have to be spoken out loud. Nobody has to say, hey, you can belong here if you agree with us. I mean, human beings learn social conditions with extraordinary precision. We notice the slight hesitation after a question that is not allowed. We notice which confession receives compassion and which one produces concern about our character. We notice who is celebrated and who is tolerated. We notice who slowly disappears. We notice the subjects that create warmth and the subjects that empty the room. Eventually, we begin editing ourselves before anyone else has to do it. That is the hidden efficiency of a powerful echo chamber. It teaches its members to perform their own censorship. And once that happens, the community does not need to control you directly. It only needs to maintain the conditions under which you will control yourself. You learn which parts of your experience have acceptable names. You learn which questions may be asked and which questions expose a supposed defect in the person asking them. You learn which doubts represent thoughtfulness and which ones are going to be treated as betrayal. You learn how to translate your actual experience into approved language that the group agrees with. Then something subtle occurs. You stop noticing the translation. You begin believing that the approved version is what you actually think. You think, hey, yeah, this is how I believe. This is what I know to be true. This is how a person can remain sincere while becoming incredibly and increasingly false. The falsehood is not always a deliberate lie. It's sometimes an adaptation. Matter of fact, I would say a lot of times it's an adaptation. You've repeated the acceptable interpretation so many times over and over and over again that it arrives now before your original perception. The community's explanation reaches your mouth before your own experience reaches consciousness. You're not lying to the room. The room has taught you how not to know what would create conflict with it. That is why leaving an echo chamber or merely questioning one can produce such profound disorientation. People often assume that the primary difficulty is changing the belief. It's not. It's the deeper difficulty. And that's discovering how much of one's internal life has been organized around the anticipation of communal approval. You may no longer know what you think without hearing how the group would answer. You may attempt to make a decision and immediately populate your mind with the imagined voices of the people whose affirmation once gave you stability. You may feel anxiety before you have reached any conclusion because some part of you already understands that independent thought creates relational risk. This is not a weakness on your part. It's conditioning. But once you can see the conditioning, you can become responsible for what you do with it. Can't spend the rest of your life blaming the room for the fact that you continue to ask its permission after you've left it. There comes a point at which the work of recovering from this requires you to become the steward of your own mind and your own thoughts and your own belief and your own breath once again. And that doesn't mean assuming that you're always right. Autonomy is not the coronation of your own certainty. It's not the belief that nobody can teach you or correct you or see something you have missed. That's merely another form of captivity because a person who can't be corrected is still controlled by the need to never be wrong. Autonomy means that you remain present during correction. You don't disappear merely because another person has knowledge that you need. You receive wisdom without transferring ownership of your judgment. You allow evidence to change you without allowing social pressure to impersonate evidence. You listen seriously while remembering that listening is not surrender. A mature person can say, hey, you know what? You may be right and I need to consider this. Thank you. Without saying, your confidence has removed my right to think. That distinction matters. Some people have never experienced a disagreement in which they were allowed to remain fully human. Disagreement in their family meant disrespect. Disagreement in their church meant rebellion. I'll talk about that later. Disagreement in their marriage meant disloyalty. Disagreement in their professional environment meant that they were not a team player. So they learned that relational safety depends upon interpretive compliance. They can have opinions, but only within an approved range. They can ask questions, but only if the questions eventually return them to the accepted conclusion. They can be individual, but only in ways that do not disturb the collective identity. This is not belonging. It's conditional inclusion. It's slavery with a freedom suit on. Belonging allows your presence. Conditional inclusion allows your performance. Belonging says, bring your full mind, everything that you are into this room. You're accepted. Conditional inclusion says, bring the version of your mind that doesn't require anything difficult from us. Belonging can survive discovery. Conditional inclusion depends upon concealment, and it almost demands it. And this raises a difficult question. How much of what you call belonging is actually the relief of successful concealment? How many rooms feel safe because you already know which version of yourself to bring into them? They feel understood there. But what exactly is being understood? Is it you, or is it the identity you have learned to present? If the room has never met your disagreement, your uncertainty, your unsanctioned desire, your unacceptable conclusion, or the experience that does not fit its framework, then the room may know you warmly without knowing you deeply. Warmth is not a proof of intimacy. Agreement is not proof of understanding. Familiarity is not proof that you've been seen. There are communities in which people know one another's language better than they know one another's lives. And they can predict every answer, repeat every principle, identify every enemy, and defend every boundary, yet they do not know what the people beside them are afraid to say. That is not deep unity. It is synchronized blindness. It is synchronized concealment. And everyone has learned the same choreography. Everybody knows when to nod, knows which words to signal virtue, knows which words and which stories confirm the understanding of the community itself. The performance becomes so complete that it can be mistaken for integrity, honesty, maturity. But integrity is not consistency with a group. Integrity is congruence within the person. It means that what you say and what you know and what you choose and what you live are no longer divided by the need to secure approval. It means you do not need one identity for the room and another identity for the quiet after everyone has gone. This is where direct wisdom is necessary. So stop using agreement as your primary evidence that you're understood. Some people agree with you because they have never seriously considered the matter. Some people agree because they need the same belonging that you need. Some people agree because the social cost of disagreement is too high. And some agree because your certainty gives them temporary relief from the responsibility of thinking. And some agree because you're just right. Agreement by itself cannot tell you which of these is occurring. You must learn to distinguish resonance from truth. Resonance tells you that something feels familiar, relieving, or emotionally aligned. Truth makes a different demand. Truth must remain true even when the room does not applaud it. Truth must be able to survive examination without requiring you to destroy the examiner. Truth does not become false because an outsider sees it differently, and it does not become true because everyone you trust just says that it is and repeats it. The person who needs consensus in order to remain certain does not possess conviction. They are not strong. They are not standing on principles, and they are not standing in truth. They possess reinforcement. Conviction can listen, and conviction can wait. It can examine itself without interpreting examination as defeat or a threat. Conviction does not need every critic to be immoral, unintelligent, deceived, compromised, or dangerous. When a community must discredit the character of anyone who challenges its conclusions, it is telling you something important. It may not have enough confidence in its ideas to let those ideas stand without social protection. Watch what happens to dissenters. Do not listen only to what a community says about its openness. Watch what it does when someone uses that openness. Does it answer the question, or does it diagnose the questioner? Does it engage the concern, or does it search for the wound, the sin, the political motive, the trauma, the bitterness, the ignorance, or moral defect that would allow it to dismiss the concern? Does it allow someone to remain honorable while disagreeing? This is one of the clearest tests of a healthy community. It does not need to make a person wicked in order to believe that person is wrong. You should apply the same discipline to yourself. If you must make every opposing person foolish before you can remain secure in your view, your view isn't secure. If you can't describe another person's position in language they would recognize as fair, you have not yet earned the right to dismiss it, much less discuss it. If you only understand an idea through the caricature supplied by your community, then you do not understand the idea. You understand the community's defense against it. This does not mean every position deserves equal respect. Some ideas are incoherent. Some are demonstrably false. Some are morally destructive. And some people do not argue in good faith. Discernment requires us to name these things honestly. But discernment and dismissal are not the same act. Discernment examines what is present. Dismissal protects us from even looking at it. You should be suspicious whenever your first response is to something unfamiliar or different, or a perspective that doesn't necessarily align. It's not curiosity about what is being claimed, but urgency to determine which category of bad person would believe it. That urgency is often the echo chamber speaking through you. The work, then, is not to flee every community that shares your values. Shared values are not the problem. You can't build a marriage, a friendship, a church, an institution, or society without meaningful common ground. The goal is not perpetual argument or compulsory exposure to every possible idea. A life spent endlessly defending its foundations has little time to build anything upon them. The question is whether your common ground is strong enough to permit honest difference. Can this relationship hold a truth that neither of us expected? Can this community survive the discovery that one of its explanations or dogmas is incomplete? Can I revise my position without losing my dignity? Can you disagree with me without withdrawing your humanity from me? Can we remain committed to one another when certainty is unavailable? Those questions reveal whether the community is built around truth or around the maintenance of its own reflection. There's also work you must do apart from the room. You need periods in which nobody is answering you. Not isolation in the sense as a lifestyle, not permanently, not withdrawal as punishment. You need enough quiet to discover which thoughts continue when the reinforcing voices go quiet. You need to read beyond the people who already agree with you. You need to encounter the strongest expression of a contrary position rather than the version selected to keep you comfortable. You need to ask yourself what you would think if there were no social rewards attached to your conclusion. What would you admit if nobody could leave you? What would you question if nobody could shame you? What would you choose if disappointment did not feel like danger? What if your convictions existed before you learned that they made you acceptable? Which of your values cost you something even when nobody's watching? These are not casual questions. These are deep questions that I asked 3 years ago. They may unsettle parts of your identity that have appeared settled for years. That unsettlement is not necessarily evidence that you're losing yourself. It may be the first evidence that you are finally meeting yourself without a witness controlling the encounter. You must also learn to tolerate the loneliness that often appears between borrowed identity and genuine belonging. There's a space in which the old community no longer confirms you, but a new and more honest form of relationship has not yet been built. This space can sometimes feel like failure. It can tempt you to return to a role you've outgrown simply because the role was recognized, respected, honored. Do not confuse being recognized with being known. The old room may recognize you immediately because it helped construct the version of you that it expects. Genuine relationships may require more time because they are meeting someone who is still becoming visible. Let them take time. Don't rush into another community merely because uncertainty is uncomfortable. A person leaving one controlling framework is especially vulnerable to another framework that offers immediate clarity, immediate enemies, immediate language, and immediate belonging. The content may change completely while the dependency remains untouched. You can leave one ideology and carry the same captivity into its opposite. You can change churches without changing your need for religious permission. You can leave a marriage and reproduce the same self-exposure in another relationship. You can reject one political tribe and become emotionally dependent upon the applause of its adversary. Changing conclusions is not the same as recovering authorship. The simple central question is not simply, what do I now believe? It's, how did I come to believe it? And what happens inside me when the people I need don't agree with it anymore? That second question will expose the structure. If disagreement makes you curious, you may possess a conviction. If disagreement makes you thoughtful, you may possess internal ground. If disagreement immediately makes you feel endangered, ashamed, enraged, or desperate to restore consensus, there may be a dependency beneath the belief. Don't condemn yourself for discovering it. Study it. Examine it. Ask what consequence your body expects, whose face appears in your mind, whose voice is singing inside of you. What form of rejection is being repeated? What relationship taught you that love could be withdrawn when your perception became inconvenient? The purpose is not to blame someone forever. It's to locate the contract you're still obeying. Perhaps the contract says I may belong as long as I agree. Or maybe I may be loved as long as I am understandable. Perhaps it says I may speak honestly only when my honesty does not alter the relationship. Or if the people I respect question me, I must abandon myself before they abandon me. That contract may have kept you connected. It may have helped you survive a family, church, a marriage, or a season in which authentic difference was genuinely unsafe. You honor the intelligence that learned how to survive there. Then you end that contract. You no longer are required to disappear in order to stay connected. You are allowed to take counsel without surrendering judgment. You are allowed to discover that a belief you inherited is still true after examination. You're allowed to discover that it is not. And you're allowed to remain faithful to a tradition without pretending that every expression of that tradition is wise. You're allowed to love people whose conclusions you do not share. You're allowed to be wrong without becoming worthless. You're allowed to change without rewriting your former self as a fool. You're allowed to stand in a room that does not echo you and remain audible to yourself. That may be the clearest evidence that your identity is becoming you. That you are knowing who you are. You don't need to become immovable. Mature identity is not stone. It is a living structure. It can receive and respond and learn and repent and adapt and grow without being rebuilt by every room it enters. It does not confuse openness with emptiness, and it does not confuse conviction with rigidity. It does not require the protection of constant agreement. The goal is not to become a person nobody can influence. The goal is to become a person who can be influenced without being possessed. That's the work. Look carefully at the rooms that make up your life. Don't ask whether they all agree with you. Ask, what do they require you to abandon in order to remain welcome? Ask whether they deepen your capacity to think or merely improve your ability to repeat. Ask whether they make you more honest or simply more certain. Ask whether they help you become the type of person who is capable of relationships across differences, or a person who can experience safety only through sameness. Then look at the room you create for others. Can people disagree with you and remain honorable in your eyes? Can someone tell you that your framework does not explain their experience without you treating their experience as defective? Can the people you love become different from the person you expected without having to fight for the right to exist? It is easy to identify the echo chambers that have constrained us. It is harder to recognize the ones we construct around ourselves. So do not demand from others the freedom that you don't give them. Build relationships in which truth does not require exile. Build communities in which people are not rewarded for disappearing. Build a life with enough internal ground that you can receive agreement with gratitude, disagreement with curiosity, correction with dignity, and rejection without surrendering the knowledge of who you are. You need people. You need wisdom. You need challenges. You need belonging. But you do not need permission to possess your own mind. The room may answer you. It may resist you. It may misunderstand you. It may even decide that the version of you it welcomed is the only version it's willing to keep. Let that truth be painful without allowing it to become your master. A belonging that requires your absence was never holding you. It's holding the shape you learn to occupy. You're permitted to step out of that shape. You're permitted to remain present. You're permitted to be known. This is James Tippins. This is Unbound. Freedom for Life.